Hello, I'm Rick Anthony, and this is CaregiveraSist, a series of 30-minute programs of, by, and for family caregivers, most of whom are eager for information, understanding, and support. In the series, we interview experts in the field as well as family caregivers willing to share their stories about the heavy responsibility of caring for care-dependent loved ones. The series was inspired by my own experience as a family caregiver for my late wife, who had medical issues that grew progressively worse and who was diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia. Marlene was one of the more than 6.5 million older adults in the country afflicted with dementia. When she passed, we were just a few months away from our 65th wedding anniversary. I had known her for nearly 70 years. As I saw it, taking care of her was a vow we had both taken decades before. Like most people, full-time caregiving was thrust upon me without much notice. I was desperate for information and support. I knew that if I made a mistake with Marlene's medication, for example, the results could be disastrous, especially her blood pressure medications. The worst part was watching my fiercely independent spouse lose her independence. Through the series, I've learned that I was not alone. There's a great need for information and support for caregivers, especially with the increase in the incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's. To help fill the information gap, we've invited Brie Yousaitis, Director of Psychosocial Support for Abramson Senior Care, to shed light on dementia and Alzheimer's. Brie has years of experience helping caregivers and their loved ones through the various stages of care, including palliative care and hospice. Welcome, Brie.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you so much for being here. You did a great job when we invited you to speak to an adult group, my parish adult group, and everyone was very, very complimentary about your presentation, so we thought we'd give you an encore, but this time on CaregiveraAssist. When I was looking for help, and I was trying everything, I was desperate. It was a horrible experience that I've since learned other people have gone through and are going through now. But I called Abramson, and at the time, the service was, they would come over, evaluate my wife, and go back and give us a plan, but they didn't provide clinical support of any kind, but they would refer us to others if we needed it, a neurologist and so on. The model's changed now, though, hasn't it?
Yes, in some ways it has, but truly we've remained the same to healthcare management, truly working towards helping individuals and their family gain the support in the community, whether that be helping them find a neurologist if they don't have a diagnosis, or maybe someone may need physical therapy, and managing that care is truly the most important part, right? So that all the players are actually speaking to one another to understand what the family and the person needs the most.
In my case, I wasn't sure Marlene knew what she was experiencing. I certainly didn't know either. I didn't know what to expect. So when you meet with a client, how do you approach telling the caregiver and the loved one what this is all about and what to expect, what the stages are, and what the behavioral changes are likely to be?
Sure. So each person is very different, right? Each person who's diagnosed with dementia is going to have a different experience. There are similar things that may happen, such as memory loss, right? That's the main problem that we're dealing with. So I do help them to realize that it's not the end of their life. We just need to both, the patient and the caregiver, shift on how we were doing things before, right? With the focus on truly letting the person with the diagnosis continue to live their life in the best possible way with added support.
You just said it's not the end of their life. I can tell you at the time, it seems like the end of their life.
Absolutely, it does. It's a scary, because of the unknown, right? Yes. Everybody thinks that you get that diagnosis and you immediately are at the end of your rope with your memory, which is true in some sense, right? But it doesn't happen immediately. It's progressive in nature. So over time, you'll slowly see the subtle changes. They may say to you, I never had breakfast this morning, right? And you gave them breakfast, but they don't remember it. So slowly you'll see those changes occur, but they don't necessarily happen immediately.
It's interesting because in my case, everything was happening quickly, much more quickly than I had anticipated. Her behavior was beginning to change. Again, she was losing her independence. She was totally dependent on somebody, me.
Did she have other comorbidities?
Did she have what?
Did she have other comorbidities
blood
involved?
Pressure. Principally blood pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times the person with dementia is also experiencing other health-related issues.
Yes.
That can speed up the cognition.
Based on your experience, what are the most misunderstood aspects of dementia and Alzheimer's?
That it can be cured. That there's a cure, right? That we're going to stop this from happening. I think once people, and I understand it's a hard pill to swallow, accept the person themselves as well as the family that this is the diagnosis, I feel like they're able to start moving forward with helping the person and gain the supports that are truly needed to help the person and the family live their best life.
Are you optimistic about the research that's being done, precious little, to prevent dementia or to arrest the progression of dementia through therapeutics?
In some ways, yes. It's just so cost prohibitive, right? It's very expensive. And
you mean the research?
The research and then the medication that they're coming out with, the different trials and everything are so cost prohibitive that I think the focus truly needs to be more on meeting the patient where they're at and putting in various supports more so than how are we going to prevent it from happening.
So you're not optimistic that there will be some breakthroughs in
Of course, at some point, yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Because I keep reading about all the studies that are being done, a lot of blind alleys, and a lot of dubious research as well. Nonetheless, there seems to be some promise that sooner or later, if we're smart enough, we're going to break through this, maybe with AI, for example.
That is the hope, yes.
Every so often, I read about new therapeutics that can extend the life and slow the progression. In my case, I mentioned to my primary when I learned about some therapeutics, what should we do? Should we try them? And cost was not an issue because we never got that far. And he said, yeah, Rick, we could try, but why would you do that? Why would you extend the inevitable? You may feel better about it, but it's not necessarily good for Marlene.
Yes, and I agree with that. I
would.
do, absolutely. What is the quality of life and why are we doing this? Are we doing this for the patient themselves or are we doing it for the family who are not ready to say goodbye?
Yeah.
And it's understandable, right? You don't want to say goodbye. You don't want to give up. You want to try everything possible.
But it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Tell me about the new program that I just recently read about.
Yes.
A program with Medicare and Medicaid that Abramson is now part of, but you have a partner in it. Is that well?
Yes, Suburban Geriatrics. So we partnered with Suburban Geriatrics to work on what's called the GUIDE model, which stands for Guiding for an Improved Dementia Experience, and it's an 8-year pilot program that we were just approved for. It just started on July 1st, and it's really geared towards helping patients and their families have the best experience as possible. The main criteria, you have to have Medicare as a primary insurance and also a diagnosis of dementia.
Well, from what I read, the services that will be provided under GUIDE, most of them are already provided by Abramson.
Correct. So we already were doing a lot of what this program entails, such as the 24/7 helpline. You can certainly reach out to that number at any time, and a care manager will be there to answer any questions you may have. There's a respite option, which we will help people gain access to either a day program or an overnight if needed. All of this is based on a series of assessments that we would do, and then we give them to CMS, and they let us know where the person would qualify, and if they do qualify, what tier they end up on. It's pretty involved.
Yeah.
And so we encourage people to reach out and ask any questions that they may have. It can't hurt for us to do the assessments, send them off, and help people get the support that they need and deserve.
So it's in place now.
Correct. It
So
began July 1.
Anyone who would like information would do what?
They could give us a call. Our line is 215-371-3400. And myself or another care manager will be able to answer any questions you may have.
What caught my attention was the respite service.
Yes.
Because there's such a desperate need for that, for relief for
Sure.
burdened caregivers. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, of
Would it
course.
be for the evening? Would it be for a week, a weekend?
So Medicare has realized how important it is to give caregivers a break. Burnout is very high. And so they have put together, based on the tier that you would land in, whether or not you would be able to utilize respite hours. So that could be for a 4-hour evening period. It could be for a day period. Maybe it could be for a 5-day period. It's not unlimited. There is a cap to it. But we would work with you in figuring that out.
And under the program?
Yes.
Would they send someone into the home?
If that's what the family and the person would like. We could send somebody into the home. We could possibly send them to a nursing home or an assisted living. Or if it's a daytime event, we could see if they would be able to go to an adult day program.
Brie, I have 3 close friends now whose wives have dementia, Alzheimer's. And that's a question I have to ask you. What's the difference, if any? They are both, the 3 of them are professionals, PhD teachers. One's an artist. The other was a retired attorney. So it has nothing to do with intellectual capacity or, as you know, Alzheimer's doesn't discriminate. But if they had called you, and I've suggested they call you, if they had called you, what would you have done for them now under the program that you now have?
Sure.
They're desperate for information.
Yeah.
They don't know where to turn to for information or help.
Right. So initially we would take that phone call, find out a little bit more about them and the person living with dementia. And then we would come out to their home and we would do a series of assessments and send that information off to Medicare. When Medicare receives that information, they let us know if this person and their caregiver would qualify for the program. Once they qualify, then we know which tier they land in, and then we can let them know what services they will receive based on their tier. That could be anything from respite, education, support groups, all to alleviate some of that stress that the family is feeling dealing with a person having this diagnosis.
For people who are not eligible for Medicare, put that program aside, how would you respond to the appeal for help?
The exact same way, except we wouldn't be sending the assessments over to Medicare. At that point, we would be finding out what they need and who would best fit that need, right? Whether that be we're desperate for aid support in the home. We have no money. What avenue should we go down now? We do have money. Which avenue should we go down now, right? People with money, people with financial means, and people without financial means are still dealing with the same issues, right? So we just need to find what avenue would best suit them and their needs.
Okay, the important question.
Yes.
Most people, I think, and I'm among them, use dementia and Alzheimer's interchangeably.
Yes.
But they are not the same, right? Well, they are the same.
They are the same.
But it's a question of labeling.
Sure. So dementia is the umbrella term. And then under dementia is Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia. Those are your major ones that you hear of often. There are plenty of other ones, Parkinson's disease, dementia, but they all fall under the dementia umbrella. So are they interchangeable? When you say dementia or you say Alzheimer's disease, they're synonymous, right? But with Alzheimer's disease versus Lewy body, there's some differences that you would see. For example, in Lewy body dementia, you might see more behavioral changes, more aggression than you may see in your Alzheimer's disease. So there are subtle changes under each one.
Right. I thank God I didn't have to deal with that, but I have friends who have dealt with Lewy body. That's a horrible disease.
Very, very hard.
Horrible.
And there's only a certain amount of medications that can truly help with it. And then it's the thought of, do we want to go down the pharmacological route, or should we try the non-pharmacological interventions first, see if they work, and then go down that road, which is also my go-to, non-pharmacological first, and then we can deal more with the pharmaceutical.
I think, if not the toughest decision a caregiver has to make, is when they can no longer handle it and they have to seriously consider placing the loved one in a facility. In my case, I was beginning to look at facilities in anticipation of that. The neurologist that we were dealing with said to me early on, your wife may live 10 years, but then again, she may not. Actually, she didn't live anywhere near 10 years because of the underlying problem. But how do you counsel people who are agonizing over that decision?
It's really case by case. It's really situational. What supports do you have in your home? Are you able? A lot of times, parents don't want to bother their adult children, right? They have their own families, they have their own lives. They don't want to bother them, which I absolutely understand. Yes. However, if the adult children truly knew what was going on in the home, I'm not a betting person, but I would bet that they would be more than willing to help, right? So what can we utilize first to help out in the home? And that's truly the way the world is moving, along with the guide method. It's truly for people remaining in their homes. People want to stay in their homes longer. So what supports can we put in place to help them remain in home before we start looking at institutionalization, right? Because I know that's not what family members want to do. So typically I weigh all of our options. I help them weigh all their options, and then I help them maybe set up tours to go see a facility and help them navigate that world too, because that can also be confusing.
But caregivers who are pushed to the edge, they're exhausted.
Yeah.
They want relief.
Yes.
And many times, I've talked to a lot of people, many times my affection, my love will reach a point where I'm sorry, I can't do anything more. Again, one of my friends with a Lewy body, he said, I will never, ever put my wife in an institution, never. 3 years into it, he said, I can't handle it anymore. And he put her in an institution. He took her out again because he wasn't happy with the services, the care she was getting. And so she remained home until she died. But that can happen as well. You're just pushed to the point of not making a rational decision. You make the expedient decision.
And I think that happens because people don't realize what is out there or what they can truly get, right? Yeah. People don't realize that maybe I could do a 5-day respite. I might have to pay some money out of pocket, but it would give me some relief. People don't even realize that's an option, right? Or they don't realize that through the Area Agency on Aging, they would qualify for some services in the home that maybe they wouldn't have to pay out of pocket for. So I think that happens a lot of times. People just aren't aware. They aren't educated. And really, in our world, in the United States, we're going to live forever. It's not going to happen to us, right? So I don't blame them, but I would encourage them to reach out, even to us, and see if we can help them in any way so that they don't make a rash decision.
well, even more frustrating is you finally make the decision, the tough decision, and then you start looking at various, and then you find out there's a 14-month waiting list or 2-year waiting list because there aren't that many beds in most of these memory care centers. And they're not building more beds.
No.
I guess because the trend is care at home.
Yes. Yes. And also I think that's because there's not enough people that want to work in these facilities, right? There's just not enough workers to take care of everybody who needs this type of care.
Yeah. I'm a Eucharistic minister at my church, and I go to a nursing facility, including the memory care center. And it's, one, I come away saying, thank God Marlene didn't live to have to live that kind of existence. And it may sound selfish, but it's much for her because it would have been
course.
But you're right, because the staff really doesn't do very much. They're more custodial than anything else. They make sure they don't hurt themselves, they make sure they go to meals and so on. But there's no real care being given to these people who, for the most part, look comatose because they're just sitting there, and that's how they spend the entire day. And my heart goes out to them. There's one in particular, she looks at me and her eyes, they're just empty.
Yeah.
Just empty.
It is sad. It's very sad to see.
It's sad. As you know, as well or better than I, a high percentage of caregivers, unpaid family caregivers, have to work for a living. And so they'll spend a full week at work, 30, 35 hours, and then put in another 20, 25 hours as an unpaid caregiver. 53 million of them in this country. Most employers, and I've done some research on this for another project I was working on, most employers don't know what to do with their employees who are caregivers. The reflexive reaction is, well, you can have more time off. Therefore, you don't have to take your sick days. You don't have to exhaust those. You don't have to be absent as often as you have been, et cetera. And that's not the solution. It may be part of a solution, but that's not the solution. So as a professional, what counsel do you give to employers as to what they can do to help their employees who carry a heavy burden? Again, as you know, that kind of a dilemma can result in career paths that just evaporate, conflicts with the other employees, lateness, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a disaster. Now what do we do?
It's $1 million question, right? Rick, I don't know if I have the answer to that. I do know that there are some programs where, unfortunately, people will quit their jobs or put their careers on hold, and they do get paid, probably not as much as they would, to take care of their loved ones. I know some counties, I think Philadelphia is one of them, where they can apply to actually get paid for taking care of a family member. But like you said,
$15 an hour, something like that.
It's not.
No.
I don't think we have this solution. I think that our country really needs to take a look at how we're caring for our geriatric population and what that's going to look like in years to come.
Well, wherever there's a need, there are opportunities. I know there are a couple of consulting firms that have popped up who are consulting with employers, large and small, to try to provide some assistance, service, et cetera, if only to be more aware of the stress and strain these people are under. I also read about another one where employees were volunteering to create a support group for their colleagues and filling in for them, just checking on them because of the isolation.
Yeah.
It was impromptu. It just came up from nowhere, which I thought was great.
That's wonderful.
There'd be
That's
some way
wonderful to have that work environment.
To encourage something like that.
Yeah.
Well, are you in favor of the legislation to compensate caregivers, rather, even though it's a nominal amount?
Of course, right? Of course. If they, If they can show that they're doing the work, I mean, unfortunately, there are some people in this country that'll just act like they're doing it, and there's neglect and abuse and everything else, which of course I am not in favor for. But if they can show that they're actually helping their loved one, which I know many people who took exceptional care of their loved ones, then yes, of course, I think that they should be paid for it.
I wish they could be paid more, because as $15 an hour is de minimis.
Yeah.
Absolutely de minimis. It's a little bit, it helps, but it's de minimis. Other countries, as again, you know better than I think do a better job of supporting caregivers and people who need care. The Scandinavian countries, for example, where, like Social Security, money is taken out of the paycheck and put aside.
Right.
Exactly for this kind of situation.
Culturally, they're so different, right?
They are.
The way they even live is so different.
Yes.
They tend to live in generational housing.
Yes, right.
Some of the Asian countries specifically, they take care of their elderly or revered, and you don't put them anywhere, and you take care.
That's dissipating.
Yes.
I have a friend who went to China to consult with them because of their aging population. They don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
No, it's a global problem, and again, as you know, we're reaching a caregiver crisis in this country, and we're not prepared for it.
No.
Not even close.
No.
I don't know what we're going to do. Because of the increase of the incidence of these kinds of problems, I assume you support purchasing long-term care.
Yes.
Although that industry has a lot of area for improvement. I had to deal with it because we had purchased long-term care. I've talked with many other people who've had the same experience. This is my opinion only, that they exist not to pay benefits, because they make it so arduously, tediously necessary, with all the paperwork and going back and forth and back and forth. And when it's all over, there's nothing. I was dealing with them before, during, and after Marlene's passing.
Yeah. It's
and
tough.
these are big companies. And the problem is, as you may know, way back when they started it, they never knew what they reserved for, because they didn't know what they were getting into. And insurance companies, it's all about reserving for the future.
Exactly.
And they're losing money. Every year I get a letter asking if I want to terminate my contract. They'll give me back all of my premiums.
Oh.
Big deal. I think now it's about $58,000. $58,000 would go nowhere today.
Nowhere.
No. There's got to be a solution to that as well.
There has to be. They need to change that, absolutely. But I do think that it's important to have, if you're going to remain at home and you can afford to pay for it.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people can't afford to pay for it. They can't even afford Medicare, let alone long-term care insurance.
And this new program, would you repeat again the numbers, the telephone number,
Sure.
and you have the information for the email, the website as well? Because I have it here if it's not.
Yes, so the phone number is 215-371-3400, and that is a 24/7 hotline.
Oh.
Also on our website, abramsonseniorcare.org, all of our information is there, and there's information about this model on that website.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Brie.
Thank you.
It's a difficult subject,
It is.
but you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you. This is Rick Anthony. This is Caregiver Assist. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and be sure to pray for peace.